We went through and interviewed, or we sent out proposals, I should say, for a total of 14 architectural firms. Out of those 14, we had 12 that responded, and what we had asked for out of the 14 was pretty much a statement of qualifications, experience, specifically in the educational community. Out of those 12 proposals that we received, the committee selected 5, and out of those 5, we brought in for interviews. The interview committee dedicated an entire day. And I want to thank those committee members, particularly Tracy that is on the board, and Tom that's on the board. It's always difficult to leave your full-time job and still dedicate a full day to your community, but you did so. So we took a full day, interviewed all 5 of the firms. Very, very good interviews on the part of all 5, but within a few days we did begin to focus in on one company that we thought not only interviewed well, but began to address a lot of the criteria that we had put together as a district and as a committee. And one of the things that, even above and beyond just the fee structure, and just above and beyond the educational background, even focus on the elementary level, we really look for a firm that we thought could understand the community, understand some of the objectives of Hudson, and not only would bring a professional competency to the process, but also bring enthusiasm and bring some excitement and join the district and our residents as a true partner. So the firm that, out of the 5 that we did interview, the firm that, and will be coming forward to the full board tonight for a recommendation, is the Hoffman Company out of Appleton, Wisconsin. And I think at this point, Tim, what I'll do is turn it over to you and have you introduce the folks from Hoffman, if you would be so kind.
Your name, Tom Cox. Thank you. Is that working?
Yep, you're good.
All right. Tom Cox will be the lead for the project. Mark, Bulkey. Okay, Mark Bulkey, Jody Andrus, and Catherine Cruikshank is the Hoffman team. So, Tom, if you have any words that you would like to tell the board tonight, feel free, or if you have any questions of them.
Is that mic on?
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Dick. Really, I'm to amplify and echo what Dick said. We're really excited by the opportunity, and we want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to work with the school district, to work with the community, to work with the kids. We're anxious to get going, anxious to engage, a lot of people and get some different voices into this thing, really to help you define, design, and build a school for the 21st century. We're really excited by the opportunity, and not to take up too much time, but just to say thank you very much. And we're going to be kicking this thing off with our design meeting tomorrow, and we're ready to go. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. With that, Dan, then I would turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dick. We'll move on to the Communications Committee meeting report. Cindy?
Communications Committee did meet, and I just wanted to thank again and recognize the Friends of the Hudson Schools for all of their help in passing a referendum that will result in a new school. But the Communications Committee also feels it's very important for us to acknowledge that there was a sizable vote against that referendum, and we want to learn more about that, and particularly to do an analysis of the communication that the district has been giving to the community. And so what the Communications Committee talked about in our last meeting was how we would go about gathering information about the quality of our communications and about our ability to really give people the information that they needed in order to make a decision, and also to collect some information that will help us really acknowledge and continue to listen to those persons in our community who initially have not spoken in a positive voice for this new school. But we do want, the Communications Committee is very interested in letting our entire community know that we are not done listening, and that we will continue to solicit and actively pursue feedback from the community, from the investors in our school district, and that we are still very, very much dedicated to continuing a two-way conversation that we feel we've begun now. And so the efforts of this committee are not in any way, shape, or form diminished by the fact that the referendum is over. So looking forward to hearing more from the community as time goes on, both related to this new school that we're excited about, but also in terms of all of the other things that the district is doing and all of the other ways that we're impacting our kids in our community.
Thank you, Cindy, for that report. Any questions for either Cindy or Dick's reports? If not, we'll move on to the Personnel Committee meeting. Mark?
Stick there. Okay. It's on. Okay. The Personnel Committee did meet last week. That's myself, Brian, and Cindy. We had a rather lengthy agenda. Amongst the things we covered was the... Oh, these were... Oh, right. Hello. Oh, is that on? It is. That's better. Yeah, okay. Was the principal selection plan for the new elementary school, which we're terming now for convenience sake to Southside Elementary. Obviously, a name hasn't been chosen yet, but that's what we're using in the interim. The plan being to hopefully identify a principal candidate early, so that that individual can be involved right from the get-go, even as early as the design process, and have a lot of input in what that school is going to offer to our students. Additionally, with that, then a person will also be identified to work with that principal and sort of be mentored then. This is, of course, I'm jumping ahead here, assuming we would perhaps have an internal candidate for that spot. That hasn't been decided, of course, but it's very early in the process. But if that's the case, then we would have a sort of a mentoring relationship set up for the new principal candidate, if we are able to do that internally. So, but again, it's early in the process, and I don't think there's really any more to say about that. We did approve the Personnel Committee approved a staff position to deal with increased enrollment in the Social Studies program. Some of our, I think it's World History sections now have 30 students in them, and this is going to involve actually increasing the time of a current staff member from approximately half-time to, I believe, full-time, to bring some of these class sizes down to our guidelines, which, as you know, is we strive to keep them under 27 at the secondary level. And many sections, I forget the number, but it's quite a few now, have 30 students, I believe. In addition, with regard to staffing, the Personnel Committee is endorsing the addition of a staff member temporarily in the Willow River Elementary Special Education Program. There's been a demonstrated need there, and we're going to put on an individual that I believe will be grant funded, at least through the conclusion of this school year, and then the program will be reevaluated at that time, and we'll assess what we might need to do by way of permanent staffing after this year. We had a very fine presentation by Peg Shoemaker with regard to requests for 2 additional staff development times, late start times, and the Personnel Committee did also endorse that, bringing, I think, the total to, I think it'll be 7 now. I didn't write that down. I think that is be 7, including the late starts. Yeah, be 7 late starts, excuse me, and 2 early releases. Is that right? It's 9 total, including the late starts. 9 total. 9 total. Okay, okay, very good. Then, moving on, we also endorsed and we'll be acting on that, I think, later on tonight on the agenda, athletic training services contract with Larson Physical Therapy. The Hudson Hospital was previously providing those services for us, and they are, I guess, no longer interested. They were doing it for us on the cheap, and but we did find a local firm that is going to give us a very competitive rate. Again, we'll look at that later, and the Personnel Committee, again, endorsed that contract. This is for providing athletic training services, a trainer that would be available after school for athletes, I think 3 to 5 in the afternoon, and then also to be at games, athletic events, to provide services to our students. And lastly, we just discussed actually a draft of the staffing approval process, just sort of to, I guess, kind of outline where some of the responsibility lies in as far as staffing goes, whether these decisions are made at the board level, superintendent level, personnel director, and the board, of course, has in many of these instances the ultimate authority for ratifying the position. But as far as the discussion of hiring and it's just more or less to sort of formalize where the responsibility lies, not necessarily any changes in that regard. And again, that's just a draft, so we'll probably be looking at that later and coming back for action. And I think that'll wrap it up.
Mark, just because I didn't know the difference, could you explain the difference between a trainer and a coach?
Well, a trainer is someone that actually has a certification. I think it's from the National Association of Athletic Trainers, and I think it's a fairly comprehensive program and examination. And of course, so you have to be tested and certified in that. And this individual, per the contract, will have to have and maintain that certification while they're employed. Well, they won't be an employee of the district. They're an employee of Larson Physical Therapy, but working for us under contract, they have to maintain that credential while they're providing services for our students.
And the role of this person is to provide medical services, injury-related services.
Exactly. I'm not intimately involved with what they do, but primarily I think would be related to injuries and the prevention of injuries probably too.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions for Mark? If not, I want to thank all the committee chairs and committee members, and it's apparent that all of our committees are busy working on a lot of different projects on behalf of the school district. We'll move on to topics for action, consent items, including personnel and expenditures in the amount of $1,637,630.04. I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the consent items.
Mr. President, I'd move the approval of the consent items as listed under 8A, 1 and 2.
We have a motion by Tom. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Brian. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, motion is approved. We'll move on to the elementary school architect contract that Dick was discussing earlier. Tim, do you want to lead that discussion?
Sure. Before you have the AIA document B-141. Can't hear me? Okay, how's that? You hear me now? Okay, it's good. Thank you. Before you have the AIA document B-141, which is currently being reviewed by our legal counsel. We expect that review to be completed this week. And at this point, in my discussions with them, they've done a cursory overview of the contract, and at this point, don't feel there's any major changes that need to be made. We did discuss the contract in some detail at the Facilities and Grounds Committee tonight, going through some of the different items that we had addressed as we talked about the contract with Hoffman. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask.
Do we have any questions?
Just a couple of comments. the standard form, the AIA form that's in front of the board tonight, pretty straightforward, pretty standard. The architectural fee is a competitive fee, and I think the biggest concern that we had entering into discussions with Hoffman was the reimbursables, and very typical in any type of design contract, whether it's engineers or architects, et cetera. And I think to the positive for both parties, there will be a cap, a maximum not to exceed on the reimbursables being travel, lodging, meals, telephone calls, long-distance calls, et cetera. All those reimbursable costs are well defined in the proposed agreement. So it's a good agreement and one that the district can be comfortable with.
Any other questions, Tom?
Should note that our attorney is currently looking or reviewing this contract as well.
That's correct, yes. So they expect to be done with their review sometime the end of this week.
So are you suggesting, Tim, that our vote on this and the action that we take be conditioned upon or contingent upon the final attorney's recommendation and approval?
That's right.
Okay.
Final review of the attorney and the administration, and I think Tom has a motion.
I can make it.
Okay.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that the board hereby authorizes the board president and board clerk to execute a contract between the School District of Hudson and Hoffman Architects for architectural services. And this authorization is contingent upon negotiation and approval of contract terms by legal counsel and the administration.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Tracy. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion is approved unanimously. We look forward to working with the folks, Hoffman, and the months to come. So, good luck. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the 2007-08 Online Learning High School Pilot Project. Sandy?
Last month, Ed Lucas, principal of the high school, Ed Lucas, and IT coordinator Nancy Toll and myself provided an overview of a proposal to begin online courses, a pilot program for the 2007-2008 school year. Tonight we are back seeking your approval to move forward with that pilot program. Just an overview of what we said last time. Again, we're looking for the 2007-2008 school year. We're talking about a hybrid model, meaning a combination of face-to-face and online. And truly what we are proposing is to keep it very tight, and it would be an every other day, face-to-face every other day, flex time on the off days. We're hoping to have both a blend of core classes be a part of the pilot as well as elective courses. There would be summer curriculum writing time. In our research and what Nancy Toll and Celeste Nelson know about online learning, since they have taught, is that the upfront piece is what's so important, that planning time before you begin teaching the course. So we'll provide teachers with some additional time during the summer to get that up and ready to go. Then we'll be working to develop an evaluation, working with the teachers, how's it going, student, parents, and we're still waiting to hear if we might be a part of a special project looking at value added as part of this piece. And then again, just to remind you, we already have the necessary tools available. We're going to use eChalk, which is already in our system, so we can move forward with that. Now, in your package, you probably saw the survey. This is something that's new since the last time, so we thought we'd provide you and the community just an overview. But during the month of December, we asked via email and or building announcements for juniors and seniors to go onto the high school page and complete a survey regarding online learning. And you can see we had 86 juniors and 77 seniors, which does give us a fairly good sampling. The first question that was asked, have you ever taken an online class? And just as we thought, and this is the one that's a yes, no, but you can see that the majority said, nope, haven't been a part of that. So currently they are not participating in any online classes. Second question, would you have been or would you be, and we have both of those going on because obviously we have juniors, seniors answering the questions, interested in taking an online class for high school credit? And you can see now with the yes, no, Interest. Interest is there. 88% of the juniors, 77.8% of the seniors. What type of classes do you think should be taught through online learning? Very interesting. You can see both juniors and seniors coming out very similar, saying business ed would be pretty good, English, foreign language, math, science and social studies receiving the highest scores. And then we followed up with what types of classes would you want to take online? And it was fairly reflective, the same kind of response as the previous question. Would you have been or would you be interested in taking online classes if no credits were involved? Just to get a little sense if they might just want to be part of a pilot. Didn't interest them as much. They want to have that credit piece. Almost 71% of the juniors and close to 78% of the seniors saying, no, we would like to take it for credit. Next question, if you failed a class or were credit deficient, would you have or would you consider making this up online? And that came out very strong as a yes. So that might be an area in the future we'd like to consider, that credit recovery. What online model, now this one I found very interesting, the next couple. What online model would provide the greatest flexibility for your schedule? And we tried to give them the definition of the three choices, and you can see Model A, all online. You know, don't have to show up, it's all online. Model B, show up every 3 weeks, and then Model C, the every other day. And they were kind of like, oh boy, every 3 weeks, that sounds good. But yet then when we followed up with the next question and said, which online model would provide the greatest opportunity for learning? Probably Model C when I have a little more face-to-face. So we kind of took that as they were pretty honest about their responses. That was pretty good. Which online model would provide the greatest preparation for your future? Again, Model C, every other day, the one that we're pursuing. And then the next one, there's lots of color here, but we're asking what online learning model would work best for the following classes. So we're asking for those three choices to look at each one that's coming out. But again, for the most part, you can see that they're again looking at that Model C, but it gets a little clustered there a little bit. Now this we were very pleased, and I think this is one of the questions someone had last time. Do you have access to the internet outside of school in order to participate in online learning? 100% of the juniors, 98.7% of the seniors, which means one respondent did not. So that makes us feel good that most of our students would have access to that opportunity. And then if it had been offered or will be offered, I would have signed or will sign up for an online class in these areas. And again, the juniors, who this will be affecting them next year, very high in business ed, English, and then really high in social studies, science, and so on. But it was a good first survey for us to get a little baseline on what our students are thinking. The departments that have stepped forward to consider pilot courses are in the area of business. The courses would be accounting and then the youth apprentice work experience. Art would be drawing and painting 2, 3. Science, we had quite a wealth of offerings there. Physics, anatomy, and ecology. English is willing to try the college prep, the writing course, that's the upper level. And mathematics, currently their Java class. So from this point, really now it becomes, if approved by the board, now it moves into the registration process. It's kind of like, will they come? They said they're interested, but will they actually sign up? So we're working, Nancy told us, a draft that she's put together of a registration form specific for online learning. We're going to actually have it as an addendum to the handbook so it really stands out. So we go through the online, what's our hybrid, what's the requirements of the computer system you have to have. We talk about the characteristics of a good online student that we shared in some of the research last time, and then go into having what course would you like to take online. Then we have a teacher sign-off as far as this student has the technology capabilities to do an online class, and then a parent sign-off. So we think we have most of our issues that we want to have just to move forward. We're going to meet with the counselors, review that document so they have the knowledge they need when they go out to talk to juniors and seniors for next fall. And then we'll work with parents and students. Meg Heaton already talked to me before tonight that we'll be doing a piece in the paper, so if we can do that before registration and start the parents to understand what that online option will be. And then we will finalize pilot courses. We'll look at the registration numbers like we do with any other course currently. look at staffing, and then see which ones we can fly with for the pilot. I'm hoping we have somewhere between 3 and 5 out of all those that we can actually run and move forward with that pilot. Again, the summer training writing piece will be very important. We've talked to UWRF, and they'll be offering a one-day training for the teachers who are interested, and it could be for next fall or even in the future, on how to design an online class. Then Nancy and Celeste will follow up with training on our eChalk system, and then we'll provide approximately 40 hours of training curriculum writing time for them to design the course and move it forward. My guesstimate, if there's 5 teachers with that time, is about $5,000 of what I use for summer curriculum writing will go for that piece. Then we'll work on that evaluation development, and then we still are having ongoing meetings with the union. We're kind of looking at it, Jennifer and I, year by year. Is there any contract language or letter of agreement we need for 2007, 2008? And then we go forward, we'll look at 08, 09, and go onward. But right now, most of our language fits because teachers currently teaching 5 classes. With online, it would be the same. So we're meeting with Mr. Ellingson in the next couple of weeks, and we're just trying to monitor if there's anything that we need to do with that piece. So again, we're here tonight seeking your approval to move forward with that pilot, and if you have any questions, we'll be willing to answer.
Sandy, I have a question. On the last pages of the survey data, other classes junior would like to see offered online. Hair, what? Third from the bottom. Did they have a list to choose from, or was that an open-ended question?
Oh, on the back side, I don't have that in front of me. Yeah, I assume it must be some kind of like beautician, but I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know.
I really enjoyed the results of the survey, and most enjoy the lists of courses that students would like to have online.
Yep.
And there's just a great variety of courses from both juniors and seniors, and it looks as though they've really thought about this, and many of the things that they're asking for online, it seems to me, are things that are suitable for online, except hair. I don't know what that is. But a lot of language courses and a lot of global conflicts and biology courses, and a lot of the courses that they list here, I'm really impressed, are digital and technology courses, so software courses and creative digital skills courses, and I think that's really showing a lot of thoughtfulness by our students in this opportunity.
And the ones you mentioned, again, we'll start with our pilot internal courses, but a lot of them they mentioned would be courses we don't offer. I mean, you saw Latin, French, AP Bio. It's like there's classes they'd like to take, and so it's just whether or not to venture out into that arena in a year or two to offer classes through a vendor that we don't offer currently in the district.
Well, there's clearly interest.
Mm-hmm.
Tom,
A
go ahead.
question, Sandy, what has initiated this project? I mean, was it the purpose of heightening the value of our education to children? Was it the ability to gain space in the building? Was it you know, I mean, what is kind of
It
created
probably
this?
could be all of the above, just
Okay.
like some of the research you're doing for where our school's heading in the future. Technology is a big part of that. And when we look at schools across the state, across the nation, many of them are into online programs. And so we wanted to provide our students an opportunity to, online learning is another delivery model. So, I mean, it's our course, but a different delivery model. And so we wanted our students to have that opportunity. Those of us who have students at that college level recognize that technology plays a huge role when they move to that next level, and also in the business world. So it definitely is to prepare our students. On the flip side, for those classes we can offer first and seventh hour, we gain ourselves a little bit of space. It does help us with that as well.
Any other questions from board members?
Dan, just a quick question. Is it too early to answer what the format would be? Would it be interactive? Would it be just a module where you do on-screen learning and then submit your answers? I've done both, believe it or not. But I'm just kind of curious how that would work, because I've always done it remote.
Yeah, a little blend of both. I mean, some days the teacher may on those off days say, here's an assignment, here's the sheet you need to complete, you load it down, complete it, send it back. On other days it could be questions are posed and then there's discussion room that's going on between all the students in the class. Nancy gave me an example just the other day of, teachers may do PowerPoint in their class, but they tend then to narrate as they're showing the PowerPoint. So one of the things they'll have to do this summer is to come up with some narration that they add to that PowerPoint so that students can view it on their flex time online and then also have that same learning experience.
Another question, sorry. Do the children, the youth, qualify to participate in this? I may have missed that. You may have covered that before, but
Well, in our registration form, we're going to try to put out sort of the characteristics of students that are successful with online. And a lot of that deals with being able to work independently, being organized, self-motivated. We aren't going to not let someone sign up. I mean, that we're going to provide an equitable situation, but we are going to stress with parents and students, here's the kind of characteristics you need in order to most likely be successful with this pilot program.
Other questions? Brian? Oh, I'm sorry, Sydney?
Are there times when these classes will be offered the in-building portion? Will they be at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, so that students can have an early dismissal or a
Right.
later
As
arrival?
best we can, we'll be offering them first and seventh hour, so then on their flex times, they either will come late, come second hour, and or leave early.
And then parents are also giving permission for their students to, and for
Correct.
those who want their students not to have that option, we would have an alternative for them, a study hall or someplace for them. on the
They
off
won't
days.
be able to stay here at school if they sign up for the online. We don't have any, but anyone to supervise. But there will be the option if you want online physics or do you want traditional physics. That'll be your choice.
So those who sign up for online will be expected to be off campus
On your flex
on
time.
those flex days.
Mhm.
Sandy, can you talk a little bit about, as a student, I guess my first question is, do students need to be taught how to use an online learning program? And then secondly, when a student is, learning online, are there some assessment points along the way so that a student just isn't, progressing successfully through the program? We catch it early on and just...
And that's part of the reason we're starting with that every other day. I mean, every other day that teacher will see them face to face and hopefully can intervene like they would in any other class situation. Now I lost my train of thought.
Assessment,
Oh,
are they taught how to use?
We just talked this week actually about if we know the students either this spring or in the summer of bringing some of them in maybe in August and or during that first week of class, that it would be really focused in on how do you access your e-chalk and make sure that everyone has those skills that they need.
Okay. Another question I have regarding other successful schools that have used this type of online learning system. Have we learned both, what works, what doesn't work? I mean, are there some
Some
things
hidden
out
pieces.
there that
That's partly why we're starting with the hybrid. That's shown to be the most successful. Credit recovery, as you saw, kids are interested in that, but those students tend to be the ones that struggle with being an online student. And so that's an area we just need to be cautious as we move forward there. Otherwise, if you look at some of our neighbors, Menominee, all the way down to Waukesha, that has a whole school that's online, they are flourishing. They're growing with their online programs.
Other questions, board members?
Just add a quick comment, Dan. I'm very excited that we're moving in this direction. I just think it's the wave of the future, and I think this is going to be a more and more common delivery model. And I think it's certainly when you think it opens up the doors to, you mentioned, Sandy, about courses that we may not offer, and what Latin was one in here, and maybe even hair later on, Cindy, I don't know. But I mean, when you think of the wealth of things, learning opportunities that can be out there, I mean, the world is open once we get online. So I think it's a great opportunity for our students, as well as even just preparing them for continued learning as adults. I mean, I like to think we all keep learning throughout our lives, and for adults, this is going to be probably a very common delivery model for education. So,
Yeah, some of our administrators currently in graduate programs, this is how many of their courses are being delivered.
right. So,
And
I'm an
you know,
enthusiastic supporter.
Me too. I'm really excited about this. I've been sort of bothering you about this since you arrived, and I'm really excited to see something happening with it. I just wanted to say that there are a lot of very successful online tutorials for people who are considering online learning, both to help them learn how to do it, but also to help them assess whether or not they're good candidates for online learning. And so it probably, would be worth our while to at least look at some of those, and maybe to think about providing some kind of a tool that might help our students assess whether or not they've got the right skills for that. And so, I mean, just sort of as an aside, there are many out there, so it's been done successfully.
Sure. So maybe we can share that with counselors. If they have someone who's not quite sure, maybe they can run through that tutorial.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. I think that this is a delivery mode that is going to give our students the flexibility that they need really to learn how to handle as they move into college and as they move into the work world. And I think it's going to be really a critical set of skills for them to learn. I'm excited about the opportunities. And I think it's going to be great for our faculty to have the job enrichment opportunity to write their courses online.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Sandy. That said, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of this online high school pilot program. Yes, Brad?
Like to make a motion.
A motion by Brian,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 2007-2008 online learning high school pilot.
Second.
okay, a motion by Brian, second by Cindy. Any additional discussion? If not, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion is approved. We'll move on to the request for the additional 2007-08 staff development time. I believe Peg Schumacher is going to speak to this issue.
Do I? Oh, here I go. Hi, I'm happy to be here tonight to talk to you a little bit more about staff development. In early December, I joined thousands of educators at the National Staff Development Council, where I continued my learning and to see how I can assist the Hudson School District as we move to become an exemplary school district. One of the things that I spoke with you about earlier was the notion of job-embedded, results-driven staff development. And part of the way that we have been working on the job-embedded staff development is through our late starts. The late starts have allowed us to work together in learning teams. Each school in our Hudson School District has a learning team. These learning teams are composed of cross-grade level, cross-department teachers who are coming together for the common purpose of improving their practice and ultimately improving learning. What we would like to do is we would like to extend those late starts to an additional 2 late starts, which would mean that we would have 7 late starts for next year and 2 early releases. The early releases are used for grading, but the additional late starts are used exclusively for the purpose of learning teams looking at student work, looking at instructional strategies, looking at research, looking at best practices, and eventually looking at the actual work of our students. So the principals of the Hudson School District, many who are here tonight, as well as along with the support of the district administrators, are encouraging the board to allow us to have 2 additional late starts so that we can continue this journey of improving practice in the classroom for our students. I will entertain any questions or comments.
Any questions for Peg?
Yes, I
Cindy.
do. Peg, when we talked about this in the Personnel Committee,
Yes.
and I expressed at that time concerns about the palatability for high school students of the shortened hours.
Right.
Has there been?
What we did is the principals met this week, and I included that as a caveat on the proposal that the secondary principals will look at how they can make that more conducive for students. And so they will certainly bring that back to their site-based teams to see if there's a way of improving that.
And then the second question is, how will this affect the calendar?
Well, are you talking instructional minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. We are well within reason on our instructional minutes. I tallied that we have, we're required to have 350 minutes of instruction each day. The Hudson School District has about 380 minutes. And so if you tally that up, we are well within our minutes that are required by DPI.
So adding 2 late starts will not cause students to have to go later in the fall or later in the spring or whatever?
No, not at all.
Okay.
In fact, we even have room if there would be snow days, that kind of thing. So.
Thank you.
Okay, Tom?
Peg, are there any measurable results that you've discussed in terms of what you're looking to gain from outcomes as a result of this additional development time?
Yes, and it varies within each building. Part the elementary, we are examining our literacy practices in particular, and that's directly tied into our SMART goals. At the middle level, they are examining assessment practices, and they have a team of teacher leaders who have been trained and now are training the rest of their faculty on assessment practices with specific goals and outcomes. And at the secondary level, we have established professional learning communities within I believe, over 100 teachers are placed into different learning teams, and we are building those professional learning communities. They have looked at some research. They will, by the end of the year, be looking at lesson design. And so there are definite outcomes for each of these teams, and they tie directly into our SMART goals as well as the district focus that we have for the year.
Any other questions from board members? Superintendent?
I'd just like to reinforce Peg's comments that this addition is really focused on improving teacher practices so that we can improve student learning. So the purpose for this really is to improve student learning and give us time for our teachers to also learn so that their practices, they can continue to improve their practices.
Okay, thank you. That said, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of this additional staff development time.
So moved.
Motion by Mark. We have a second from
Second.
Brian. Any additional discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion is approved. We'll move on to the athletic training services contract. I know we had some discussion earlier from I believe the Personnel Committee on this topic. Jennifer, do you have some more you want to?
I just want to add a couple things. We're pleased tonight, actually, after a lot of work to get to this point with the athletic training services contract with Larson Sports Medicine and Physical Therapy. This replaces services that were previously offered by the Hudson Hospital. Rich Larson, who's the owner, is here tonight. If you want to stand up so everybody can see who you are. And Larry Ofstedal, the athletic director, is here. And I want to reiterate my thanks to them because Larry worked really hard, and Heidi's here, who's the actual trainer. Worked really hard for the last 6 months to get us to this point. The purpose of this training contract will provide immediate first aid and evaluation of athletic injuries and advise medical follow-up services where appropriate. So, Cindy, that kind of answers your question previously when when you asked Mark what kind of services this would provide. It is at a comparable and competitive rate to what the Hudson Hospital previously offered, and this will be renewable every year. We will look at it and negotiate this contract with Larson Sports Medicine. Does anybody have any questions?
So we'll review this on an annual basis?
We will review this, and
Okay.
it's set, just so you know, at a specific hourly rate as included in this packet, and an hour maximum, and anything above the specific number of hours will have to be approved. So we have created this, again, after modeling previous contracts that Nancy helped with, so.
Okay, thank you.
Dan,
Any
I
other-
have just a quick question. Is there any one sport that is using the service more than?
This is exactly why I have Larry here. I'm going to have him come up and answer that
You
question.
know, obviously, if you think soccer, maybe
Yeah.
football, so I'm just, is there any
Basically-
trend?
Excuse me, Dick, I'm sorry.
Larry?
I don't know if this is not, basically, the contact sports is where we would use this most. Football, the boys and girls hockey, soccer, wrestling, gymnastics. It's not a contact sport, but the chances of injuries in them. It's very pertinent that we have a trainer at those contests all the time, just because of the type of injuries, head injuries, neck injuries, and so on, that we can, instead of having to wait for an EMT to get there, we have somebody right there at the time that's going to administer the necessity of the treatment or whatever that's taken at that point.
Yep,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks, Larry. Any other discussion, comments, questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the athletic training services contract.
I so move.
Motion by Tom, second by Cindy. Any additional discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion is approved. Next item of business is the special education report by Nancy Sweet.
Okay, and there we are up on the screen there too. You have in your packets, starting on page 14, some of the material that I'll be reviewing tonight. I previously reported some of this information 2 years ago, December 2006, and the date has been updated and added to. I was looking forward tonight to introducing to you Barbara Rapoon, who has been my associate since the beginning of the year, but she was unable to be here this evening, so I'll carry on, unfortunately, without her. The report will cover very basically legal requirements, legal compliance, program evaluation, and I'll provide for you the source references if you'd like to look further. First of all, the legal requirements. There is federal law and there is state law, and within those laws are defined 13 areas of disability. The three more recently added areas of disability are autism, traumatic brain injury, and significant developmental delay. Significant developmental delay applies only to preschool through kindergarten ages. We do have Hudson children identified with all of these disabilities presently. Public schools are required to evaluate all students, public and private, ages 3 to 21 years, suspected of having these disabilities. We do regularly evaluate and provide services for students suspected of or identified with disabilities from St. Patrick's School and Trinity School here in Hudson. And we sometimes evaluate children who are homeschooled, who are referred by their parents. In Wisconsin, infants with disabilities, those children birth to 3 years old, are served by the county. They're served in birth to 3 programs. And just prior to those children turning 3 years of age, they are referred to our school district and our teams. You have additional to the material given to you a rights brochure. This is special education rights for parents and children. You'll have to put on your spectacles to read it, but there is considerable legal authority to the special education rights for parents and children. And just one of those rights that parents have is the right to give or not give permission for the school to conduct an evaluation. And if they do give permission for the evaluation, and if the results of that evaluation qualify the child for services, they again would need to provide their written permission in order for us to provide special education or related services. The public schools must follow federal and state evaluation criteria. The Hudson School District does not have its own criteria. We must follow state and federal criteria, and there is no single decision maker. It is a team of educational professionals along with the parent who examines these criteria and looks at the data and the results of the evaluation, and a team of people called an IEP team decide whether or not the child has a disability in accordance with the criteria. The team asks two questions, essentially. First of all, does the child have a disability? And if the child does have a disability, is there a need for special education? We certainly do have children in the Hudson School District who meet the criteria and have identified disabilities, but they do not require special education. There are certain accommodations that can be made and other provisions short of special education, and that does happen and happens successfully for some of our students who have identified disabilities. But if they do qualify as students with a disability, and if they do require special education, then what we provide in the law must be free and appropriate. And the appropriateness relates to the program itself giving evidence that the child is making progress. We'll talk about that a little bit more. One of the other important concepts associated with special education is called least restrictive environment, LRE. And some of those considerations are, the most important ones are access to students without disabilities. So it's not appropriate or legal to isolate students with disabilities, remove them from contact with their normally developing peers. They need to have access to the general curriculum. And most of the time it's unusual that a child with a disability would need a special curriculum in all areas. They benefit greatly from access to the majority of the curriculum that other students are receiving. And to the extent possible, they should be able to attend school in the school they would normally attend if they did not have a disability. And we do, for the most part, our special education programs and services are provided in all of our schools. There are some exceptions where we have low incidence disabilities and we have very specialized programs. A couple of those are the autism programs that we offer at the elementary level, early childhood, and the Gateways program for more severely disabled young children located at North Hudson. The public schools must show evidence of individual student progress on identified special education goals. Essentially, that's what it's all about. That's our burden, is to design and offer a program that allows the child to progress. And it's a very individualized demonstration of progress. Parents can appeal to the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction if they disagree with our evaluation results, failing to identify or identifying in a way that they are not comfortable with, or where we place the child, the program, or anything about the provision of special education. So they retain those appeal rights all the way through the process and for the extent of the child's eligibility in special education. Special education is funded through district, state, and federal sources, and mostly district. When special ed law was written 30 years ago now, we were promised 100% funding. We've never received 100% funding. And in fact, the funding that initially flowed from the federal government and also through the state has been declining over the years. I recall the funding level being at 80% at one time, and right now our categorical aids are at approximately 28%. Those are the state categorical aids, and that applies to the salary and benefits of the teachers and the educational assistants working in special education and some of the related service professions. Whether a teacher has 10 students or 20 students, we still receive 28% approximately of those salary and benefits are reimbursed to us. We do not get more money if we have more students. There is, in addition to that, some federal flow-through funds that are several $100s per student, that's helpful, but it's not sufficient. It is more expensive to educate students with disabilities, and again, the majority of the funding does fall back on the district level. I did hear this morning that at the federal level they're proposing to raise funding to 40%, but we've heard that before, so we'll see what happens. In terms of legal compliance, and as we go through this, I have actually added some charts that I'll mention to you that are not part of your material. But this first document is DPI actually looks at individual student records. They have come as teams, and they pull randomly individual student records, and then every year we submit data to the Department of Public Instruction, and that's how they monitor our compliance and every other school district's compliance with the law. And in part, they look at data like this, our referral rate, and I'm giving you some comparisons, and they are not, DPI is a little behind. They're not current in giving the state comparisons. So what I have here is the most current I could obtain, and I would be unwilling to do that calculation myself. I want there to be a DPI reference for it. So the 2 years on this page are 2002, 2003, and 2003-04. And you can see that the referral rate, and this would be the percentage of students referred for an evaluation because they were suspected by someone, parent or school staff, of having a disability. And in Hudson, as compared to the state, over these 2 years, our referral rate is less than the state average, 2.58% as compared to 2.83% in that first comparison year, and 2.49% to 2.91%. And then a percentage of those children who are referred and evaluated ultimately are identified. So the second data is a percentage of the referral rate. So if there were 100 students referred in Hudson, we would have identified 59 of those 100 during 2002-03, and the state average would have been 65. Okay, that's a, for instance, translation of the percentage there. And in 2003-04, 57 as compared to 65. So our referral rate is less and our identification rate is less. The incidence rate is the actual enrollment. That's the age 3 through 21 enrollment. And you can see the percentage for these 2 years, and we're slightly more. But I provided for you in the next slide, and this you do not have, so you might have to look up there. This is a 5-year history, and it's really important not to look at 1 or 2 years. You have to look at several. And I'll call your attention to the most recent 2 years, 2004-05 and 05-06. And our prevalence rate, that's the same as the incidence or enrollment data, in both of those years was less than the state average, 0.20% less in 2004-05 and almost more than 0.5% less in 2005-06. Red flags come up when DPI reviews data. If you are significantly less, I mean really less, or very much more than the state average, because it suggests that on the one hand, if you are very different, meaning very less or fewer than the state average, you might not be doing the job that you're supposed to be doing. And then if you identify more, a lot more, on a percentage basis or an actual number, perhaps you're not applying the criteria correctly. So we are over a period of years within that range, plus or minus, I would suggest. Another comparison that I did that I think is important in a district that is growing as fast as ours is the growth in special education student enrollment. How does that compare to the overall growth in our K-12 population? And so I did, my office did based again on DPI records, a 6-year history, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of actual numbers. And you can see at the top the enrollment history for special education, and we've experienced a 3.5% growth in 6 years. And you can see on the bottom of that same page the K-12 enrollment history, and we've experienced a 21% growth. So you can see that special education is growing, but it's not growing anywhere near as rapidly as our overall student population. This is another piece of data that I slipped in that I thought might be of interest to you. This is a 5-year history of students exiting special education and the reasons why. And this is actually a report that we have to submit to DPI, and so I took that report. If we look just at the more recent, the 2 most recent years at the bottom, in 2004-05, during that year, 111 students left special education. 37 of them moved. They left the Hudson School District. 4 were removed by their parents for homeschooling. 1 was placed in a rehabilitation center by another authority. 1 was placed in a correctional facility by another authority. 4 dropped out. 22, that's about 20%, graduated with a diploma, and close to 40% were returned to regular education by their IEP team, and their IEP objectives were met. Their special education goals were achieved. and that's about 40% of the students. The year before, about 45% of the students were returned to regular education, again, because the IEP team felt they could be successful and their goals had been achieved. I do have data on, not a chart for you, but I looked very quickly just before tonight at the numbers of students. We've got the who moved out and how many moved in. In 2004-05, 37 identified students moved out. 69 students already identified by another school district as having a disability and need for special education moved in. So more moved in than moved out. And the reverse was true to a certain extent. In the year previous, it was 61 out and 53 in. But those coming in, identified by other school districts, are also figured into our incidence rate. Not all of the students here were originally identified by our school staff or our parents. But that's, and then you can look at the other years. Program evaluation then, for special education, it's not about how well they do on the state test or the district-wide assessment. We're interested in that, and we look at that. We disaggregate that data, and we look at it to see how well our students with disabilities are doing in comparison to, other populations of students. But for the individual student, it's all about their progress on their goals. And this is a list of measures that are used by our IEP teams to determine whether or not they're making progress and ultimately whether they've achieved their goals. Overall, special ed program evaluation relies on post-high school student outcomes, including employment, independent living, post-secondary education and training, 1 to 5 years out. We are now only in our 3rd year of collecting and interpreting this kind of data, and the numbers are too small to draw conclusions. But when we're in a position to report that data to you, we will. There are many very interesting and heartwarming success stories to tell. There are some frustrations with post-high school employment, independent living, and some of that has to do with the difference between the requirements of the K-12 system as compared to the requirements of adult services. And sometimes there's a gap, a significant gap, and we're continuing to be frustrated with that, and we're working very hard, though, to try to have our students employed. Some of them are even in transition living situations while they're still in high school now, and they're starting some training in technical settings. So we're doing our best to get some of those things in place before they leave, because the services are not as available later. And we want them to continue to grow, and we want them to maintain the skills that they've achieved here in high school. And actually, you've heard reports before about our collaboration with Bridge. That's what this part of it's all about, is our work with the community, the parents, and those adult service organizations. We do every year, we survey parents and adult students in terms of how satisfied they are. And these are the last 2 years of survey. And I didn't quite believe the results of 100%. So I did look at it myself, and it is 100%. We're satisfied with special education related services, their degree of participation in the process, the adequacy of the information they received, and the transition options for students age 14 and older. And there were around 50 respondents to that particular survey. But we try to monitor that, and occasionally we will receive a survey of dissatisfaction, and we always respond to that and meet and call and talk with the person who had concerns and questions. Last year was a particularly good year, it looks like, at least for that sample of parents primarily and a few adult students. And finally, I just show for you and for the public, we'll be putting this report on the website, and those are the original sources for the data, and you and they can seek further information if you'd like. And I do want to thank Nancy Toll, who I think is up in the booth helping with this this presentation here. Do you have questions at all?
Any questions for Nancy?
I just had a couple, Dan.
Yep.
Comment. First, back on page 16, actually, I guess page 3 here, I just made a note. When you were stating, Nancy, that for some students who are determined to have a disability, but it is found to be unnecessary to provide special education services for them. You mentioned that certain accommodations can be made to take care of the student's needs. Does that student then have an IEP, or does that fall outside of that?
Yeah, they would not have an IEP, but they might have a 504 plan. That's another discussion. But they might have a 504 plan if they need accommodations that are unusual and need to be coordinated and monitored annually. Most of the time, it's a combination of highly qualified regular ed teachers knowing the modifications and willing to make them, and a highly motivated student.
Okay.
And maybe parents working very hard with the student as well. It's an all-around effort, but it works out for quite a few students as well.
Is that student then considered or counted as being in the special ed education program or not?
No.
The 504 is something apart
different
from that.
Apart from that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
On just on any given year, just a round number, how many students do we have that can be accommodated by a 504 plan as opposed to an IEP? Just
Well, in terms of a formal plan, there may be a dozen students in the district
Okay.
that require that.
Okay.
And there are others that could be eligible for it but don't need it. So you don't provide more than you need.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And just for a little clarification, and if you said this, I apologize, I may have missed it. I know you said that most of the funding right now comes from the district level.
Yeah.
The feds have never stepped up to the plate like they promised. I think you said that about 28% of our aid comes from the state, Nancy. Is
Right.
that- And you didn't identify a percentage, or I didn't hear it from that we get from the federal government. What? round
It's a
figures?
few. It's not a percentage, but it's a per pupil appropriation that's made on an annual basis by Congress.
Okay.
It has been going down. It's gone up and down, both. And I looked at last year, which would be it's based on a count done in December, and then there's an appropriation. It's a couple $100 for the preschool level, and it's about $1,000 for the flow-through part of it per pupil. But if you add that up, it's not sufficient to provide for the teacher's salary and benefits and the assistant and the inventory and all the related services. It's helpful, but it's not sufficient.
Okay. It sounds like it's something in a single-digit percentage as far as what the cost would be.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be.
And I guess just lastly, congratulations on the survey results. I mean, I just find them remarkable. Quite frankly,
I
even
did
the
too.
04, 05, I think is remarkable. Considering the range of disabilities our students have, and I just think that really speaks well of your program. I mean,
Well,
if ever there's a program that's awash in a bureaucracy and requirements that would be very difficult to do a job that would, yield these kind of results. I think special ed would certainly be it. And,
Well, and it's certainly a testimony to our teachers and our assistants and the rest of our staff. Our principals, too, are great leaders and problem solvers and rapport builders with our parents, and it's really a testimony to them. Really
absolutely.
is. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Nancy.
Okay.
Nancy, to what do you attribute the differences between the state figures and ours, both the referral figures as well as the identification figures?
Well, they're fairly negligible. The difference is fairly negligible. So I don't know that I could say anything really that would be significant, because they're not real significantly different. They're a little bit less in terms of the identification rate. We do work hard to provide for consistency in the district. We have team frameworks, and our psychologists who coordinate those IEP teams do meet continuously and do share their interpretations with each other, and I think across the district, different teams would make the same decisions. Maybe that isn't true in some other districts that work kind of separately from each other, and
Well,
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Generally, when results are not really statistically different,
Yeah.
that is, that they're within a
Yeah.
range that is not systematically caused by anything, one would expect those differences to fluctuate. But, I mean, we're consistently below the state and across time, and by a kind of a very standard amount. And that's not usually what we'd expect to see. So it's very interesting that it's there. And you probably are right. How we attribute it, I don't know, but it would seem to me that it is demonstrating a consistency that that we wouldn't have expected to see. So that's neat.
Any other questions, comments for Brian?
One more comment. I know it's a little bit of a marathon session here, so I'll be
Okay.
brief. I've been on the board for, I think it's nine glorious months. But I just wanted to, I'm very impressed with the leadership you have in this, in a lot of areas, and this is one of them. I'm translating, kind of all this, right? But still kind of keeping your focus on the students, and especially students with special needs, is real commendable. And I think you and the entire district have done a tremendous job. So,
Well, thank
nice
you.
work.
One of the messages that I've always given is, it's really what you provide to the students that's most important, and it's also the relationship that you build with the parents. If you hold, that brochure again, and all of the paperwork and all of the legal encumbrance, it really sometimes gets to the teachers, but that's not what it's all about. And if you keep the focus on the students and you keep the focus on the relationship with parents, then it doesn't become all about that brochure and all about the legal requirements and everything. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, just a couple quick comments.
Dick?
Real quickly, and it is a marathon session tonight. I would remind the board that, due to the generosity of the taxpayers on this last referendum, there will be 2 early childhood class spaces in addition to the 4-section school. For the traditional students, there will be 2 for the early childhood, and that will be part of the program. And so thank you to this board for recognizing that and making sure that's part of the program. The second thing I just wanted to really comment is that, if you, and it kind of alludes to what Nancy talked about with the families, and I think a lot of times we can lose sight, or we do lose sight that, we're maybe just focused on the student. But one of the things that you'll see is that when you've been on the board a while and you go to a graduation ceremony, and you may see a student come across the stage that's a disabled student. They've been in the district since age 3 through 21. And you do see a lot of heartfelt gratitude's coming back to the district, and it becomes more than just the student. It really does become about the family, and you'll see some of the families with the disabled students are some of the biggest advocates, quite frankly, for the school district.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
Anyone else?
that's it.
Okay. Thanks, Nancy.
Yep.
Very good, thorough report. We'll move on to topics for discussion. The 2007 WASB resolutions. As you all know, the WASB convention is coming up next week, and as is the case every year, we get to review many of the resolutions that have been submitted by various school districts, and what's in your packet is a number of those, I believe all of the resolutions that have been submitted, as well as I believe the WASB Policy and Resolution Committees reviews those resolutions, and then they approve a certain number of them based on the committee's action. And those are in this packet. Typically what we do is we try to give our delegate to the WSB General Assembly, when these resolutions are discussed, try to give him or her some direction in terms of how they should vote on those resolutions. And so this evening, I guess what I'd like to do is if there's some comments that we can provide to our delegate, or have some discussion as a board, and if we feel strongly about any of these resolutions that we'd like to give direction to our delegate, I'd like to do so. So I know I've written some comments down, but I'll open it up here for board members.
Dan, our delegate is Mr. Minnick, right?
That is correct.
And our second is Tracy?
I believe that is correct, yes.
And Tracy's not going to be at the assembly, correct?
I will be front and center.
Okay.
You can count on Dick showing up. He'll be there.
We need to appoint an alternate
We should probably do that.
who will be there.
It is an interesting process.
Right.
Yeah. Isn't that Wednesday morning? The delegate assembly?
I believe it is.
Okay, that would certainly preclude my participating.
Mine too.
Who do we have Dick attending, Mark, you're going, Tom's not, Brian is not, Tracy's not, Cindy is. I'm planning on being there for part of the session, so.
We just can't let anything happen to Dick in the next week.
It wouldn't
I'll
be
take turns watching him.
It wouldn't be a bad idea to have the alternate in attendance either, because it's an interesting process to see how the various school districts position themselves. Very distinct opinions, depending on geographic location, size of the school district, et cetera, as to how they may present or the positions they take on the resolutions.
I guess what I'd like to do is, we don't have that as an agenda item on the agenda as it relates to the selection of delegates. We've already gone through that process, so without that being on the agenda, I guess we're going to have to go with Dick and hope that he hangs in there for the duration.
We'll represent you well.
Of the meeting, so.
Mr.
that-
I have a comment.
Brian, go ahead.
Actually, my comment's about what's not being approved as a resolution. There was 27% of these, 4 of them had to do with the escalating cost of healthcare. For our our teachers and faculty, and they turned down all those resolutions. And so I think that's of note that we're not the only district in the union or in the state who's facing these significant issues. That with the escalating cost and the kind of resistance to go out to competitive bids on that, and the fact that tax dollars are going into the hands of insurance companies versus our teachers. So I think that it's interesting that none of those were approved or even open them up. So that was the most interesting to me, what wasn't approved. So
Absolutely. If I could just tie in, because Brian almost took the words right out of my mouth. Although when I looked into it a little bit closer, because I just think that should be the laser focus of the WASB, is dealing with the insurance and the post-employment benefits. Now some of these, and this is maybe more a question that Dick can address. I noticed that on the resolution that's on page 2122 with regard to making a healthcare provider not a subject of bargaining, it mentions here that the WASB policy does not provide for reaffirmation of existing policies. So I sort of took that to mean, Brian, that they may have had this before and approved it, and so therefore they don't run it through the mill again. I don't know. I hope it hasn't fallen off the table. So I hope that they just determined this one was redundant and therefore, didn't approve it. And another one of these, the one proposed, unfortunately, by my hometown, Wisconsin Rapids, I thought was a very poor proposal, which basically was going to allow for going over the revenue cap for healthcare costs. I mean, that was what a terrible idea to avoid the whole issue and basically just go put the bite on the taxpayer. I thought that I can't believe they come up with anything that bad. But so that one I'm glad they turned that one down. But anyway, just to reiterate what Brian said, I do hope that there is a focus amongst these delegates on insurance costs and post-employment benefits, because it's a huge, huge problem. And with each passing year that it's not addressed, it becomes bigger and more unmanageable. So.
Okay. Other
Well,
comments?
Dan, I will, if I could just reference pages 46, 47, 48, 49. I think this is I'd say third or fourth year in a row that the Menominee District has forwarded this information as a resolution. What you have in Menominee is really a district with a declining enrollment, so they're hitting a crunch period here pretty quickly. And so you can see the charts that they're looking at, again, as far as post-retirement benefits and health insurance. I guess the thing that I would say to the board is that the school districts, or my perception is the school districts that have forwarded resolutions are those districts that are fairly experienced board members. They've maybe been through certain issues a number of times, and that becomes apparent, and it certainly is not the vast majority of school districts. What I would say, obviously, for this year, we're too late. These resolutions are a done deal and will be discussed at the state convention. But if there are issues, one issue, two issues that are critical to this board, then we should be about our business over the next 4, 5, 6 months, so that we're in a position to become an advocate on a certain resolution that we would like to forward.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And it is possible procedurally for some of these resolutions to get resurrected at the delegate assembly, but it does require a 2/3 majority support to bring those back onto.
It does. And another thing that you see that becomes very apparent is that you have some strong individuals that become advocates for certain positions, and they continue to advocate for that position, I think, to the detriment of the other delegates. So it's a political process in many cases.
As it relates to the approved items by the committee on pages 57 through 59, are any of those items, I think the comments from Brian and Mark, Dick are well said, but as it relates to these items that seem to have survived through that committee approval process, any comments regarding any of those? I reviewed those. I didn't see anything that really shook me up at all.
One, just on a positive note, Dan, that I thought is the Janesville District proposal to allow a proportion of athletic participation in a sanctioned sport for FIAD credits. I was in favor of that. I've often thought that our student athletes put in, long, hard hours, lots of training for our various sports, and I certainly think that they should be able to get some FIAD credits for that. So that was one that I thought was a good
Me too.
proposal.
And the thing is that those are activities that they've chosen for themselves and would participate in even without getting credit. They do it because it's something that they choose for their life. And I think that's part of the purpose of our physical education program, is to help our students choose active lifestyles. And so I really very much would like to see us support that one. And I'd also like to see us support the one that would ask WASB to send us annual updates in legislative language changes. I think that that's something that's long overdue from them, and I would like to see that that happen.
I agree with that latter point. The one thing, Mark, that I would mention as it relates to the credit for extracurricular sports is, and Sandy maybe can, add some to this, is, with all of our curricular activities, there are certain standards that we, expect our, staff to instruct throughout the course. And I guess my question is, how would that sort of fit into the curriculum and the standards if we just sort of take these classes and give students credit for that?
Right. And I noticed that one it was a half a credit per sport, so they'd have to at least, in order to earn the credit, they'd have to be in 2 sports. But the part they don't mention, but they must be disallowing, is meeting the PE standards. I mean, there are certain standards that are in all our courses, and the coaches wouldn't necessarily be up on meeting those standards. It might be something we'd need to look at, but that would be a piece that they must be then playing is out of the picture.
And what about with...
They'd also have to change the state requirements, I would guess, or put that in as an addendum or something.
So the standards would be one of my questions, whether or not we'd be meeting those standards with accepting those types of extracurricular activities. Other question has to do with, the coaches, and, I know all the coaches
like highly qualified teachers.
Are well-trained,
Right.
and whether or not they meet that requirement in terms
Correct. In Hudson, most of our coaches are teachers, so they are highly certified. But there are some instances where the coaches are community members that wouldn't have that certification.
Right. So those would be two of my concerns that, in that discussion, are we meeting those requirements, which I think are very legitimate and valid.
Sure. Although they would still, because the maximum number of credits, it would be 1, if I was correct, right, Sandy? So they would still be required to take a regular FIAD class, if you will.
Correct.
So.
Yeah. But I think by law, we're required to meet those academic standards, and FIAD fits into those.
Is that a resolution that was forwarded? Did
Yes.
you notice?
Page
It is.
38.
Yes.
Okay. I'll report back to the board. I know we can't take action this evening on that specific resolution, but I'll see, what the vote is of the delegates, and I'll report back to the school board.
Okay. Mary?
I'd like to comment to Dick on page 58, the math and science graduation credit requirements. We could support as a district increasing math and science high school graduation credits, but only if sufficient resources are provided. But I think we need to think about how that fits in with the rest of our graduation credits and what that would mean. It would limit the number of choices that students would have, so we need to consider that. But certainly, it's really important, and I know the legislature has spoken about how they would like us to go this direction, and it's really important that we have the resources to do this. That's necessary staff, facilities, particularly in our case when we think of science and science labs, the lack of science labs, we would certainly need more at the high school, and we do not have facilities to accommodate that. So that's a real critical one for us as we look forward to space for learning, the lack of space for learning, and also the lack of certified staff. If we would increase graduation requirements around the state, the reports I have seen, we do not have enough teachers prepared in math and science to fill the vacancies that would need to occur. So we need to be very careful about supporting something like that, even if we're behind the intent of math and science increasing the knowledge that our students have in those areas. The other thing I would just have us look at is the Merrill recommendation on page 26, going into 27, One Voice, One Future. Nancy talked about our special ed expenses and the reimbursement that we receive for those expenses. And it talks about in 1993-94, the state reimbursed school districts for special ed expenses at 45%, and now the reimbursement is at 28%. We know that that continues to be a burden, more of a burden that is shifted to our local taxpayers. And then also the concept of English language learners, which are increasing in number not only at the state level, but in the Hudson School District. In 1993-94, those expenses were reimbursed at 33.1%, and the reimbursement today is 12%. And so I think we should certainly look at that one if that's brought to the floor at some point.
All right, I'll pay special attention on that as well.
Mr. President? I would like to point out Resolution 7-4, fuel and utility costs, and this is suggesting that districts be allowed to levy taxes outside of revenue controls for increases in fuel and utility costs. And I would just like to say, I think that we should stand against this one. And I know that fuel and utility costs are outside of the control of school districts, but they're also outside the control of taxpayers. And when our fuel and utility costs are going up, so are our taxpayers. And what they're doing in their homes to accommodate the increased costs is they're tightening their belts and they're managing to continue to heat their homes and fuel their homes in the same way that the school has a responsibility to at least take those same measures. And I strongly disagree with us passing that burden on to the taxpayer, who then sort of gets double whammied for it without their having any control over that either. So I feel that I really would feel strongly that we should not only fail to support this one, but actually stand against it.
I would concur with Cindy as well. Interesting to note that also came out of Wisconsin Rapids. When I go home next time, I'm going to have to rattle the cage. But I just don't like these circumventing these cost control things that they're doing there. I don't. But and I must not have read that one as closely, Cindy. So I'm glad you picked that up, because I would agree with you.
So noted.
Okay. I'd like to just go back to 7.3, the math and science graduation credit, and echo some of Mary's concerns. I know this school district, we raised our graduation credits not too long ago, and we're above what the state requires. So I think when you start pushing things upwards, especially when you mandate that students, increase the number of credits they receive in certain academic disciplines, it also has an effect on other areas as well, such as the arts and other what I consider other very important academic areas. So I would just be aware of that.
And I don't think there are any barriers to individual districts raising their graduation requirements in these areas. So it isn't as though the state has to raise them in order for districts to be more rigorous in their standards.
It's a good point.
I would just want to clarify that really I would imagine that the purpose for this proposal is generated because of the interest of the legislature to increase math and science. And what I believe WASB is trying to say is if you do, there need to be some parameters on that, and it needs to have funding behind it and the resources necessary for school districts to implement it. So this, in my mind, is really about resources more than science and math, probably.
That's a good context to keep it in.
Any other questions, comments? Dick, is that clear as mud? Do you have something?
It's clear as mud. I'll take good notes.
Okay. Good luck. Thank you.
But I truly, though, I will, as best I can, take notes and try and stay on top of the resolutions and come back and report on those that are significant to the Hudson District.
Thank you. Moving on. I believe we go to the superintendent's report. Mary?
Well, as you know, on April 3rd, the voters of the Hudson School District will elect two school board candidates to fill the two seats that are up this year. And we have had a drawing. Tim, as deputy clerk, has conducted a drawing for those candidates to be placed on the ballot. The filing period for candidacy ended on January 2nd, and we have 3 candidates for positions. And the order on the ballot will be Philip Katoski, and I believe Philip is here tonight. We're sure appreciate your interest in the Hudson School District. I know I'm going to be meeting with Phil later on this month, and I look forward to that discussion. So thank you so much for your interest in our school board and the students in our district and our owners of the district as well. And then next on the ballot will be incumbent Cindy Crimmins, and last on the ballot will be Mark Kaiserschott. Moving on to the district website update and referendum data, I just want to big thanks to Nancy Toll for the information that we have, for the improvements to our website, and also to our communications committee, who is chaired by Cindy Crimmins for the last 2 years, because they have played a large role in the improvements that have occurred in the website. There have been a number of communications committees that have played a role. I know Nancy was part of one. Some of the other board members in the past have been parts of those as well. So as we move forward and see the impact on our website and our ability to use this as a communication tool with the information that you have in your packet, those people are really to thank for the role that they have played in the improvements in the website and the increased communication that it's continuing to play. So you have the information in front of you, and I think that we certainly have had a major revision that occurred in the website in October and November. It really met one of our communications goal, which was one look in our community. And that would help us in communication, so people would identify us and be able to see us in various contexts. So on our website, we've gone the same direction to have that one look so people could move more freely, and it was more user-friendly to those people that came to our website. And as a result of that, you have data about the number of people who have visited our website in the month of December. This last December, there's over 15,000 hits to that website, people that came to the district. And what we were really looking at in the communications committee was the impact of referendum materials. Was that drawing people to our website? Were they using that information to gain information about the district and the referendum? And you can see from the results that that definitely was in place. Our counter, because of the changes, was not consistent. So during the time prior to December, so there's some inconsistencies in numbers, and it's hard to compare since we started counting in September 2004 on the main page and so forth. But when you look at that, you can still see a pattern in December, and I think that's the most significant thing, is the pattern in December. Please keep in mind that the PDF files or PowerPoint files can't be counted through this system. So when we think of the PowerPoint that we used for the referendum that was on the website that we hope people use to gain information, we don't know how many times they went to that or how much times. That wasn't counted here in the same way. So if you look at the data itself, we can look at the visitors over the last 30 days, and of course you can see a big spike in those visitors on December 12th, the date of the referendum itself, and December 13th, and we were the location of the count for the referendum. So people were coming to the site particularly for that, to gain that information. In fact, the county site, which historically people have gone to gain the information on the results of the referendum, indicated that people should come to our site. So it was helpful, and people did come, and that was important information for us. You also have information on repeat visitors and first-time visitors over the last 30 days. And you can see that there were more on December 12th and December 13th. And it's good for us, and when we look at this information, to see that first-time visitors, that we have a number of first-time visitors who are going to the website to gain information. And once again, it would be helpful to us if we really could look back to November and say, you know, through the time that we were talking about the referendum, what did it look like? But this certainly gives us a little window into the use of the website. On page 64, this is really the daily traffic, and it starts in September 2004 and goes up to January 2007. And once again, it's a little hard to compare because you can see it drops off while we were making changes in November, but it peaked for all-time usage when we had the middle school fire. But after that time period, we had increased people coming to the website, and it stayed up, not as high as during that time period, but certainly it increased from the time before the fire. So people were using the website and getting used to using it and coming back. The last thing I just point out to you is on page 72. And Nancy was good enough to go through here and asterisk those pages that had to do with the elementary space for learning and where they appeared in their frequency for the month of December. Employment opportunities always ends up to be number one because people are looking at the jobs available in the district. So Jen and company are very popular on our website. School information, of course, we would know that would be very popular as well. Child nutrition is really the lunch menus and getting that information. And then we look at the next thing for December, the 4th, was elementary space for learning. So that was that particular site, which listed many other documents. And then you can see some of those documents, unless they were a PDF or a PowerPoint, are really counted here and were important. And so our community mailings was the next place that people frequented. And so this has been a way for us to communicate with the public, important information for them to go to, and we plan to use the website as well to communicate progress on the new elementary school. So we will now, because the board has taken action, communicate information about our architects and share that information with the public, and they can continue to gain updates with the website. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain those.
Any questions for Mary?
Just a comment. If our friends from Hoffman are still awake, we should ask them maybe if we can link off of our website into theirs as we go through the design process. Because it has been a marathon session tonight, but it would be something to maybe take a look at, to have them link off of ours for, while we're in the design phase.
Certainly something we can pursue.
Sure.
Okay, good comment.
Did I wake up, Mr. Cox?
Any other comments, questions for Mary? If not, thank you, Mary. I don't believe we have a citizen's request to speak item that I'm aware of. So we'll move on. I did want to just go back briefly to the community recognition and Friends of Hudson Public Schools. I did not intend for that list that I read off to be, all-inclusive. I know there are many more other individuals in the community that were very active and involved in that project. So I want to also recognize and thank those individuals as well. So that said, we'll move on to item number 14. adjourn to closed session. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to closed session.
I will so move. Would you like me to read
Could
the,
you read it,
read the
Mr. Minnick?
motion? I will. I make a motion that we adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 19.85, subparagraph 1, subparagraph C, in order to consider employment data of a teacher, and E, for the purpose of negotiations for labor.
No.
No. Is that entire coming out? For negotiating competitive price and conditions for lease of property, and paragraph F, to consider pupil records, including medical data of a student.
Okay, yes, we had struck that first section of E, so. All members clear on the motion?
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion? If not, we'll do a roll call.
Holland, aye.
Kaisershot, aye.
Minnick, aye.
Turnahoy, aye.
Crimmins, aye.
Pabish, Arlene, aye.
Bell, aye.
Okay, motion is approved. Then go into closed session.